Well, regulars of Property Tribes will know that it is the support of our sponsors and commercial partners that help maintain our forums as a free-to-use community resource. And it's always a pleasure to welcome another partner to Property Tribes. And today we are joined by Marc von Grundherr, who is a director of London estate and lettings agency Benham and Reeves. And Marc, it's a pleasure to welcome you to Property Tribes as the powering the conversations within our London property market tribe.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Now, let's talk about your agency. How long has it been established, and what is your footprint like within the London property market?
Good question. So we were established back in 1958. Clearly, I wasn't there then because I'm far too young, but we've been going for over 60 years. We started with one branch in Hampstead. It's now grown to globally 27 branches. Today we have 19 in London and we have 8 overseas. We just opened in South Africa and we have 2 more in the pipeline in London. I think our spread is London. That's where we work. That's what we focus on. Our overseas branches are purely there to deal with people in that region owning London property. So, you know, it's a London footprint of the whole of London, realistically, and yeah, covered internationally. And it's, you know, it's interesting doing the different areas. All of the areas are very different, but it's still London.
Indeed. Well, I'm an investor in London myself, and I feel really strongly about what an incredible market the London property market is and how resilient it is. And we'll talk about that in a little while. But Marc, I think a good place to start is that, you know, the London market has had 2 really serious shocks, Brexit and obviously the COVID-19 pandemic. And also we are obviously talking at a very interesting time because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and there are some concerns that it may impact the property market, well, certainly the economy in the UK, which is very much attached to the property market. So really, you know, how do you think the London market is as we, you know, we're in the early days of 2022? Is it healthy?
Yep, I mean, it's really healthy at the moment. I mean, if you look at some stats, I mean, annually London's up 5.5%. It is trailing the wider UK, which is up 10.8% last year, albeit that's slightly starting to turn now. You know, Camden saw the largest increase. It's just over 16%, which is followed by Hammersmith and Fulham, Islington and Westminster, which were all showed above 15%. And the reason I think that's interesting is because that shows the strong signs that prime central London, the PCL market, is, you know, is going up. And so, yeah, I think London's in really pretty good shape. I mean, if you look at the pandemic, you know, that was a pretty serious, as you said, you know, situation that came. And again, London's up 9.5%. And Brent, interestingly enough, saw the largest pandemic increase, over 20%. You know, other boroughs like Richmond, Merton, Bexley and Harrow, they're all up over 15%. And that's showing that the pandemic influence on buying larger homes with more green space, slightly further out. And I think that's really, really interesting. I mean, the other obviously important thing to bear in mind is Brexit. Average London house prices are up 11.3% since Brexit. Again, Redbridge, another interesting borough, saw the biggest increase of 23, I think, almost 24% increase. And again, there were other boroughs which were up 20%. And I just think they're quite interesting to show that things are moving. I'm not saying that's sustainable and we're going to see 15, 20% per annum increases, but it's showing that we've had 2 major things and, you know, prices are now picking up. I mean, London, obviously, as I said, has held behind a little bit. And over the last year, you know, they are up by only 4.3% of London flats themselves, not general London house prices. But that's mainly due to lack of demand from professional tenants and professionals wanting to be in. But we're now seeing pockets where prices are going up and people are starting to come back. I mean, the letting market has been off the hook busy. I have never in my history, I've been doing this now for over 25 years. I know I look far too young, but I have been doing it since I was 3. But as a business, we have never, ever seen such a shortage of supply. We had no students in 2020 because they didn't come, because everybody was working from home and students were studying from home. So last year, there was this dearth of students, first year, second year, third year students all arriving. A lot rent in the London market, but that normal student stock wasn't there because the year before in 2020, when the market was subdued, that all rented to local people. So it meant last year, from August through to October, November, the market was as madly busy as I've ever seen. I mean, it was incredible. I mean, we were seeing rental increases of 8, 10, 20, 30% increases in some cases. It was mad. And it continues now to be shortage of stock as people, working from home. Big story. No one's going to come back into the city. Everybody's moving out. No one's going to be here. The opposite's happening. We've seen reversal. There's so many tenants now looking to rent something. I mean, I met a couple the week before last who just rented in Hammersmith. They sold their flat here in Fulham down the road. They then bought a nice little house in the country. They've been commuting in for the last 4 months, and they just think we can't do that. So they're going to rent a flat here rather than spend £10,000 a year on travel. And these are interesting trends that we're starting to see, which is really helping drive the market. So, I mean, from my view, it's all simply showing that London is very healthy and it's here, it's hitting off like a bang, if you ask me.
Well, this is why I'm so excited to have Benham and Reeves on board powering our London property discussions, Mark, because you've got access to so much data, and it's data that we can rely on to give a truthful picture. Yeah. And we have heard all of these rumours of, people moving out of the city, but that's completely turned around now. We've had somebody posting on Property Tribes this morning saying that their commuter train from Hazelmere in Surrey has gone from being empty to being completely overcrowded, everybody going back into London. Yeah. And my personal view is that the London property market is so resilient because it's such a major financial hub. And we have something that can never be taken away from us and never change, and that is Greenwich Mean Time. So we've got markets on both sides of the world open at the same time, makes London an absolute important financial hub. And all the Brexit doom and gloom, it just hasn't come to pass, has it?
No, we haven't seen any of it. We heard all sorts of stories where people were going to close their offices, downsize, move everybody overseas. Obviously, that was coupled then with COVID, which some commentators said, oh, here it is, people are moving out, people aren't coming. All I can tell you is that on the ground, where we are doing an average of 250 lets a month, I have never seen it as busy as it is now. This is not just students. The student market was busy. We're talking the corporate market. So we have a dedicated Japan desk. We have a team of 5 people that just look after Japanese companies that everybody knows, household Japanese names, and they look after their employees coming into London. They cannot find homes for them. We have at any one time 3 or 4 of them staying in short-term accommodation, trying to find them the right staff. That's in addition to our general corporate tenants coming in from large banks and law firms. It's like I'm trying to sell London. I'm genuinely not trying to talk London up. It's so busy. I mean, renewals, that's been a slight trend. Is that a lot of people that locked in rentals during COVID, of course, it's coming up now, and they're all desperate to renew because they know they have a good deal. And now, sadly, rents are going up now. And that is, a reason, because, that's caused by the shortage of stock. rents have to go up. And so we are, we're seeing some tenants renewing with modest increases, but most, I would say 90% are seeing reasonably decent, chunky increases.
Well, this is really important intel for landlords, because at Property Tribes, we always say you should find the demand before you create the supply. So you're telling us that there is massive demand in London, and landlords can go in and fulfill that demand. But of course, London, like any market, is just down to even a street level in terms of what works for investment and what doesn't. I'm naturally not a fan of flats, but I do have a caveat to that, and that is, I think flats in London actually are a good investment. I think they work very well because of the high demand. And if you've got a 1 or 2 bedroom flat, they are the entry point into London. And I can't really see that demand of young professionals wanting a 1 or 2 bedroom flat, or even, I think we'll see this trend of maybe pied-à-terres now as well. Yeah. People wanting to rent a flat while they're living in the house in the country that they bought during COVID. So where would you advise our community in terms of property type? Do you think 1 and 2 bed flats are a good way to go? Or if they can afford it, maybe a nice Victorian terrace, but they're like, hen's teeth, aren't they?
Yeah, so I think that's such a great question. When I started, people used to always say, I like houses and I want, to own my own house because I have the freehold and I can control the service, the money that I spend. But actually the reality is, out of our portfolio that we have, less than 3% will be houses. And, personally, from a personal perspective, so one of the things I didn't talk about at Benham and Reeves is myself, my managing director, Anita Mera, all 3 of my other directors and our senior management team, we invest alongside our clients. That doesn't mean we do collectives, but we buy. If I'm saying I think you should buy, like last year, a couple of years ago, I really like a new development coming near Southall, which is regeneration area. It's near the airport, and it's coming. I bought there, but so did 15 of our clients. But we buy alongside, and so I think that's a really important thing for landlords and for your customers, because, if I'm giving the advice to other people, I should damn well sit here and take it myself. And so where I go with that slightly long answer is I think flats are a really good thing to buy. And personally, I have a house that we live in because I have two children who run around like mad in the garden, and we have a house. But in terms of investment, for purely investment, I would always go for smaller 1 beds, maybe even studios, and maximum 2 bedrooms, because the smaller units will rent to single people, couples who maybe have a child. So because of that, there's lots more people looking for it. And therefore, you've got a good yield, because the yield on a 1 bed will be similar to a 2 bed, but your capital outlay will be less. So, if I was an investor and I was had enough money to say buy a 2 bedroom or 3 bedroom, I would honestly rather buy 2 or 3 1 bedrooms, or maybe 1 bed and 1 2 bed, because then if you ever need the money, you only have to sell 1. You don't, if you own a lovely big Victorian house, that's great. And don't get me wrong, we have clients. I've got a client from Hong Kong whose father only used to buy large houses. But if you need to take out some money, you've got to sell the asset, the whole asset. And with the soft costs of moving, I think it's much, much, much better to buy smaller units that you can almost trade them. I don't mean that, because I don't view property as a commodity, but you can change. So that's kind of my advice, is to buy flats. As you say, I love it. I own a flat in Kensington. It's in a period Victorian building. It's almost a couple of hundred years old. Maybe it's not Victorian, but that's great. Red brick building. It's in a house with period features, but it comes with more maintenance than it would if you buy something new. The other thing I would say on flats or houses, whatever you're looking to buy, and my advice to every one of my clients is or anyone who contacts me and asks me for advice, is make sure you do your research first. If I say buy a one-bedroom flat, don't just go and buy a one-bedroom flat because I've said buy a one-bedroom flat. You need to look at where you're buying it, not just any old one-bedroom flat. You know, I like areas where developers are doing placemaking. Like I said, I bought in Southall. It's called the Green Quarter. It's near the airport. I really liked it. Well, you need to look at areas where there's regeneration going on, and I think that therefore makes flats more the way to go than houses, unless you buy, as you said, Vanessa, if you're outside London, you know, Milton Keynes, you know, some of the smaller towns outside, then houses are much more the way to go. But space is constrained in London, and houses will cost you so much more. And you have to bear in mind on maintenance costs. So frankly, I think, you know, I would always go for smaller units. I think they're much easier to manage, and they're easy to exit. They're very, very easy to exit when you come to sell, because that's important as well.
Oh, it absolutely is, and I think that's a very valid point that you've made there, Mark. That it does make you a bit more fleet of foot if your circumstances change, and it's the old saying, having all your eggs in one basket. 100%. So I think you're absolutely right that having individual apartments gives you the flexibility. If you see that one isn't performing very well, you could maybe sell up and then move to somewhere where there's better performance. So no, I think you've made a very valid point there. Would you say that tenant priorities have changed? You should definitely think about, you know, buying a flat with a balcony or maybe a roof terrace or something like that. Are there changes in priorities for tenants?
100%. So as a business, we do surveys on an ongoing basis. I'm sure you do too, where we survey our tenants, and that's applicants in our tenant base. During COVID, 2020, transport, i.e. closeness to transport and the type of transport, the importance really dropped. It dropped from being between number 1 and 2 down to 4 and 5. Because a lot of people were thinking about, I'm working from home now, I don't have to go in, I don't mind so much. I'd rather, I don't mind being on a train as opposed to on the tube network. So that was a serious demographic change. However, we're now seeing, we ran our last survey, which was the end of Q3 2021, so Q3 last year, internet is still number 1, which it was during work from home. Second is outside space. And you're 100% right, Vanessa. If you can buy something with a balcony, people like to open the doors if they work from home and sit outside. You know, how many Zoom calls have we all been in where they're sitting on a balcony because they're outside? In addition to that, people like green spaces because you're near a park. If you have communal gardens, that's great, or you're near some form of green space. But then the next one is transport. Transport's back at number 3 on the list, and I think it will creep back up. I mean, the return to work, reversal of working from home. Commuters are simply unwilling to do the long commute. Who wants to sit on a train for an hour and 45 minutes each way every day? Who wants to do that? And even if if a tenant's only doing 2 days a week in the office at the moment, we all know how quickly people forget. It'll be 3 days, then it'll be 4 days, then it'll be 5 days. It's coming. The demand for commercial space at the moment has gone off the hook. Everybody's read what Google have taken on their spaces. They bought their new building because the landlord was struggling on price. They bought that. And this is an internet-based company. Why do they need more office space? They should be able to monitor everybody from home, but even they're taking more space. So, priorities have changed. But, I think the old adages like transport are very, very important. But, fast internet speed. These are important things that, landlords should be checking out. Don't trust what the sales guy, that lovely sales guy tells you. Do your homework. I always say that to people. You must do your homework.
Absolutely. Well, we have a thread on Property Tribes called London, the Comeback Begins. And I've been it was started by a member, but myself and our community have been updating it with all the good news that's happening around the London market. We've heard, obviously, that the City Boys have had a massive bonus. We do know that feeds into London property. And I think, Mark, let's move on now to your agency, because we mentioned that you do sales and lettings in London. Now, you know, sometimes people are, estate agents, they're there to, help the seller, not the buyer. I don't subscribe to that. No. I believe that estate agents on the sales side are very, very useful to investors. If somebody rang you up from Property Tribes and said, I'm looking to invest in London, I'd like to buy a suitable property, you would want to help them. And then you've got the option for them to pass the property for you for rental. So how do you, what would you say your USPs are and how you can assist the Property Tribes community?
So, yeah, well, that's a great question. So I think exactly what you said. Most people think agents are just looking to sell. Of course they are, because that's ultimately the business. I think where we as a business differ, one of our key USPs is because for so long we've been looking after investors, both in the UK and internationally. You have to have someone there when people forget about the fact you're not in London. If you're in Manchester, it's still an hour and a half on the train to come down and messing around. You need to have someone you can rely on. And so trust is a really important thing that we've built up over the years. Someone comes to me, if I don't think it's a good investment, I'll tell them. Because honestly, there's no point in saying to someone, this is a brilliant investment just to earn a sales fee. Because agents that do that, it's a one-trick pony. We look at as our clients and people that buy, whether they buy through us or they buy through somebody else. I look at it as a long-term relationship. It's like a marriage. I have to, if you buy through me, that's great. I've got to make sure I let it. I've got to manage it for you if you want that. I've got to look after it for you. You're going to have tenants come and go. That's an ongoing general process. And as a business, we deal with, little bit of a sale on what we do. So we do sales, we do lettings, we do management. We also have a sister business called Install Direct that does furnishings and refurbishment. So, we look at properties. It's not just about selling a furniture pack. I've just got a client who's had a 3-bedroom flat, his family used for years. He wants to let it now. I went to see it. It needs decorating and the carpet's done. And he said, do I have to furnish it? And you need to furnish. We furnish the living room and the master bedroom and nothing else. And then the tenant comes in and choose. If I was just selling furniture, I'd furnish it all. But I want that client to have a long-term relationship. So we let it, we do the decorating, we touch up the kitchen, and then we can do tax returns for overseas investors, and then come to help you exit it. And it's that journey. It's a life cycle of the property. As I said, you don't have to use me for everything. I always say to people, if you found a fantastic property through anybody else, if I'm happy to help with anything, and if I don't have what you want, we can still help. And that's really important, because I think, selling is, selling just focusing on sales. Agents that do that are really silly, because that's not helping the client long term. And I think one of the things that we really try hard to do is understand what clients want, try to help them as best as we can for the knowledge that we have to make the right decision, and then help them, make the most money they can out of the property. And that doesn't always mean the most rent. That might mean having, one of our Japanese corporate tenants might stay 3.5 years. That's a great, no voids, no money spent, 3.5-year tenancy. That's great. Maybe you take a little bit less, but you have that longevity. It's about what's best for the client. And I think that's really important, as opposed to just whack and out thing. So the thing I would say is, what do we offer? And it's not just, it is to property, people on Property Tribes clearly don't ring me about Glasgow, because I don't know it at all. But on the London market, I'm always happy for you to ring me, email me, or message, and I'll try to give you honest advice and you know, what you'll get from it and how it will rent and who will rent from it and who will rent it from you, what kind of yield. So we try to give that kind of free, impartial advice, whether you're buying or you're letting, to make sure you make the most out of it. And I think that's, you know, it makes me die that all agents aren't like that. Why would they not be like that? I don't understand. I genuinely find it strange, except they want to be here one minute and off the next. And that's not property. Property's a long-term investment, Vanessa. You know the stuff you own it for 10 years, 15 years. I've got a client who's got, you know, his father gave him properties. You know, they've owned the same properties for 60 years now. And that's an ongoing long-term relationship. And I think that's really, really important. And that's how business grows. And that's frankly how it should be.
Well, I totally agree, Mark. And I think, you know, I would even say that property's become an even longer term investment now. You know, we used to say 15 to 20 years. I now say 20 to 30 years. And I think the risks have been massively amplified through all the things that we've talked about, that you know, Brexit, COVID, economic turbulence that we are experiencing. So this is why we're so glad to have you on board supporting the Property Tribes community, because you're a Wikipedia of London property. And one of the things that we want to do is do a regular kind of update with you to get your views of the London property market from the coalface, because that is where you are, you know, every day of the week, and supporting investors in making wise investment decisions. That there's so many things I want to talk to you about, Mark, but we're mindful of the time. So my final question is the London property market going to continue to be resilient going forwards? And do you feel optimistic for investors who invest in London?
So, you know, look, I think property investment is the best thing that anybody can do in the right property investment. And people, the one question people ask me is, what's the best time to do it? Tell me the time. The best time to invest is when you are ready. You shouldn't kill yourself to get a loan and put the deposit together. You need to be ready. I can't pick the bottom of the market to buy. I can't predict the top of the market to sell. If I could, you know, I'd be a multi-billionaire and I'd be off. You know, all I can do is just to give advice to people to make the best decision. And you should, and I think it is, look, the wealthiest people in the UK are the landowners, Grosvenor Estate, Cadogan Estate. Where did all their money come from? Owning land. Mm-hmm. You own land long term, and you will, it's a great inheritance tool. It's a great, you know, it's a great long-term asset. Okay, maybe you don't make 20% a year. My predictions are we're going to see 5% growth this year. 5% is not bad if you've got 50% loan to value. That's 10% on your money if you've got debt on cheap money. You've got,
but it's sustainable as well. You know, that is sustainable.
100% sustainability at 5%. I don't like 10, 20%. I think it's unsustainable. It's scary. I think 5% is doable. Number one, you get capital gain. Number two, you get yield. You know, I think it is a resilient market, and things go up and down, but it doesn't crash. We were in the middle of COVID and rents were down 8 to 12, 14% in some cases. It wasn't down 70% where stuff was vacant. It rents. So yes, it's resilient. You're going to get capital growth. You're going to get a 4 to 5% rental yield. And I would recommend you go into the outside areas. You know, zone 3, zone 4, zone 5, some parts of zone 2. I like those because, you know, I think investing into the UK property and London property in specific is a safe haven investment. It's a bulletproof investment. Time after time after time, you look at history. You know, the last 5 years have been difficult, but we haven't seen crashing prices. We haven't seen landlords not able to pay bills. We haven't had a single landlord repossessed. We haven't had any. We've had no problems. Yes, some tenants have struggled to pay, but we've got through that. But that's isolated, and that's not the market. So, you know, we talk about it as a safe haven, and you did touch on Russia and Ukraine at the beginning. And, you know, in times of crisis, capital flows into the capital. And, you know, I think the Russia-Ukraine thing, it's shocking and it's very sad. But I don't think that will have any impact whatsoever onto the London market itself. And I just don't see any. We just haven't seen any. We haven't seen anything since it started. So I don't see anything. And you know, we're seeing overseas buyers coming back into the market now. Travel's reopened. I've got clients coming in from Hong Kong, from China, from the Middle East, South Africa. As I said, we just opened. You know, they're coming in. So this can't be a terrible time to buy. I'm not saying you're buying at the cheapest end of the market. I'm not saying that, but you can't, you know, who can predict when it's going to bottom out? You can't. You should just do it. It's a medium, long-term hold. And if you do that, you know, you will sit back and you will reap the rewards. I genuinely feel that. I've done it myself. I work in Brighton. I'm an estate agent, a letting agent. I own my property. I own several properties that I let out. I have my house. I mean, everything's property related. And I do it because I believe in it. And not because I can do a better job for myself because I'm an agent. Of course, you know, my staff don't do me any benefits because I work here. It's because I believe in property as a long-term investment strategy. And that's how you should view it. Don't view it. New people shouldn't view it as a quick in, make a profit and quick out. Don't do that. Go and buy Bitcoin or something like that. Go and do that. Go and do crypto. But don't invest in a property that you expect the costs, the stamp duty, the taxes. They make it very hard to do that. So don't do it. And if someone tells you they've done it, good lucky them. They're the ones that win on the horses. Then it's never me. It's always the one who wins the Grand National. Well, my son won the Grand National actually a couple of years ago. But he did it. I did 2 years running, if you can believe that. But that's not me, is it? I always got the donkey. And so I maintain it's a good long-term strategy. And it's very resilient. You know, as I said, my prediction are 4 to 5%, 5% capital growth, 4 to 5% yield, which you can get in zones 3 to 4. And, you know, the last thing I'll say is one of my favorite, you know, little stats is you look at what's happened to property over the last 10 years and 20 years. So the average price of a London property today, and house price index in December, I think it was just over £521,000. That's still 78% increase from 10 years ago, from 2011. And it's 210% for 20 years ago. You know, you can't see things that see those kind of returns that are stable and they are liquid. You know, a lot of people say to me, well, property's not illiquid. Property's very illiquid. It is illiquid in that you can't go and sell it today and get your cash out. But if you want to sell, it takes a while because that's the process. That's not me. That's our government with land registry and solicitors. But it does take a while, but you can exit if you need to sell. It's good. I think it's great planning for kids to go to school, for people that have to pay fees, university fees. There are lots of you can help kids get on the property ladder for their homes. I genuinely feel it's really good. And that's why it's so resilient. And because I think it's in the nature of British people to be property owners. And I think that, you know, we're a nation of homeowners, and I think that will continue. And I think, you know, London property, it's my speciality, but I genuinely think it's a good place to be.
Well, I'm going to agree with you, Mark, and you're very much singing from the Property Tribe's hymn sheet about it being a long-term investment. And we like to say it's not timing the market, it's time in the market. So you can't buy a property in the past and you can't go and buy a property in the future unless you've got a TARDIS like Doctor Who. So the only time that any of us can do anything is now, today. And as you rightly said, if you get your ducks in a line, make sure you're set up properly to be able to do it without too much financial stress, then get going. And thank you so much for being a supporter of Property Tribes, Mark, and for joining me on this call. I've so enjoyed hearing. I can feel your passion and your belief in the London property market, and I hope this is going to be one of many chats that we can have to guide the Property Tribes community about where is best to invest in London.
Perfect, thanks.
Thank you.